Hello guys, good day. Welcome to another video lecture in ACC 325, Governance, Business Ethics, Risk Management, and Internal Control. Now, we are still in the first topic, talking about the concepts of governance. In this specific video lecture, we will be discussing the governance responsibilities of the Board of Directors. To start our video lecture, let us identify first the concept and the definition of the board of directors. When we talk about the board of directors, guys, it is an elected group of individuals that represent shareholders. The board is a governing body that typically meets at regular intervals to set policies for corporate management and oversight. According to the words of the Securities and Exchange Commission in their revised memorandum, Board of Directors is the governing body elected by the shareholders or members that exercises the corporate powers of a corporation. They conduct all its business and controls its properties. For purposes of this code, reference to Board of Directors and or directors shall also include reference to Board of Trustees and or trustees respectively in applicable cases. At times, these can be considered as well as trustees or Board of Trustees, but although they are of the different terms, but their functions are the same, which is to govern a particular organization, primarily a particular entity. Now, in this video lecture, guys, we will be discussing the different responsibilities as well as the roles of the board of directors in a corporate setup. But before we proceed, let us first identify the first two of the 16 Code of Corporate Governance based of the Securities and Exchange Commission. This includes the board's governance responsibility. The first one, guys, is establishing a competent board. Now, obviously, a corporation is required really to establish a board and not just a mere board, but a competent board. This principle ensures that the company will be headed by a competent working board to foster the long-term success of the corporation and to sustain its competitiveness and growth in a manner consistent with its corporate objectives and the long-term best interest of its shareholders, members, and other stakeholders. It only means, guys, that the board of directors should be competent and knowledgeable enough to run the organization. So, the board should be composed of directors with a collective working knowledge, experience, or expertise that is relevant to the company's industry or sector. So, in whatever sector a particular corporation may venture into, it must be considered that the board of directors should have wide knowledge of that particular industry. The board should always ensure that it has an approximate mix of competence and expertise that its members remain qualified for their positions individually and collectively to enable it to fulfill its roles and responsibilities and respond to the needs of the organization based on the evolving business environment and strategic direction. It is as well guided by the corporate governance to have a diverse knowledge and competence with that of the group of board of directors. So that means the board of directors should not focus or should not be saturated on a single profession alone, but it's from different sectors that could help a particular corporation to achieve its objectives. The second code of governance that still pertains to the board governance includes the establishment of clear roles and responsibilities of of the board. So that means fiduciary roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities of the board as provided under the law, the company's articles of incorporation and bylaws, and other legal pronouncements and guidelines should be clearly made known to all directors as well as to shareholders, members, and other stakeholders. To make sure that everyone is doing what they are expected to do, then For first and foremost, the board of directors should know primarily the objective of the organization, including their responsibilities and how could they be able to contribute in the achievement of that mentioned objective of the organization. Also, it is considered that they should be able to have um, full knowledge of the existing rules and regulation for that particular corporation and any other regulatory agency which that corporation is under. There are two key elements of the fiduciary duty of the board of members or the board of directors: the duty of care and the duty of loyalty. The duty of care requires board members to act on fully informed basis in good faith and with due diligence and care. On the other hand, the duty of loyalty is also central of importance since the board of director or the board member should act in the interest of the company and all its stakeholders, and not those of the controlling group or any other stakeholders. The fiduciary duty of the board is to promote the value of the corporation. Thus, the board must exercise their business judgment in considering and reconciling the interests of various stakeholders, including shareholders. It is one of the main duty of the board of directors, guys, that to protect every stakeholder they might have. No, they are not given the position of the board of director only to protect or to give security or to give advantage or to benefit those who are with major ownership in a corporation, but board of directors should also consider to be loyal and to act in due care for the sake and for the interest of all other stakeholders, including the small owners in a corporation or minority shareholders. So these are just two of the corporate governance that is included in the provision that a corporation should consider or should observe. All right. So again, these two provisions of the Code of Corporate Governance really pertains as to how should the board work and how should the board discharge its responsibilities. All right. Considering that two main governance responsibilities of the board of director, it is also considered that they should be responsible for making major policy and strategic decisions. So, directors should have a mix of skill and their performance should be assessed regularly. And the boards are collectively responsible for the following. Again, letter A, they are expected to promote the success of the company. Take note, guys, that the board of directors is the one who leads the strategic destination of the organization. Thus, the success of the corporation really rely on how these board of directors set their goals and achieve these objectives. All right. Letter B is to provide leadership and direction. Obviously, they are the leaders of a corporation, meaning if the leaders are weak, then therefore it's obvious that the overall objective of the organization cannot really be realized. Therefore, they must be strong enough to make sure that they direct the organization into the right path into the achievement of the objective and goals of the entity. Letter C, it is also expected that the board of director manages risk and instituting the appropriate system of internal controls. Considered in their job, guys, is to implement risk management system that provides mitigation control of um, possible risk that may affect or that might be exposed in the organization, and implement as well appropriate system of internal controls. Letter D is to supervise lower level of management and the employees. Obviously, the board of directors may not have direct interaction with that lower level management, but it is the board of director who will choose the chief executive officer, who will obviously, the chief executive officer is responsible for the entire organization or the entire manpower of the administrative function of the entity. Letter E, they are also expected to set the strategic goals and targets of the company. Although they are the one who create and craft these strategic goals and targets of the company, but this board of director is helped, no, is guided, is aided by the chief executive officer and the management team in realizing these strategic goals. But as to the creation of the strategic goals and targets, as to the crafting of these goals and targets, it is solely the responsibility of the board. Letter F, they would also ensure that the necessary financial and human resources are taken place. So if ever the entity don't have enough resources, then it is their responsibility to find resources, whether whether it is into issuance of shares, or whether it's um letting the entity borrow or issue bonds, right? And lastly, review managerial performance. So obviously, it is the responsibility of the board to oversee the performance of the management, no? To provide controls and incentives in order to facilitate good working environment in an organization or in a corporation. Other responsibilities of the board includes letter A, monitoring of the chief executive officer, overseeing the implementation of corporate strategy, monitoring risk control systems and systems of corporate governance, monitoring human resources, issues like succession planning, training, remuneration, and etc. And lastly, ensuring the effective communication of the strategic plans to stakeholders. So it's their duty to make sure that every member of the stakeholders are properly informed, whether on compliance or on financial in nature na mga aspects. It was suggested by the UK Cadbury report that as a principle of good corporate governance, there should be a formal list of matters reserved for collective decision making by the board. And these matters includes letter A, strategy, meaning they are the ones who really craft this strategy, approving long-term objectives, deciding commercial strategy, approving budgets, and oversight of operational performance. So really guys, um the way to success is really paved by the corporate governance. The achievement more likely of the goals and objectives of an entity depends on how this board of directors work. So if this board of directors is weak and you know incompetent enough to plan and to strategize for the long-term strategic goal of the entity, then the corporation in particular might really fail. They are also involved in investments. They do approve major capital investments, major contracts, acquisitions, and disposals. So anything that is related to equity financing or finances, not just mere equity financing, but the finances in general of the entity, as made mention earlier, it is the responsibility as well of the board to look for possible finances, whether it's equity or um, through issuance of funds. Now, decisions on capital structure and financing, as what I have mentioned earlier, like 50 equity shares, 50 bonds, or the like, no, they are the ones who will determine what is the optimum capital structure for the entity that is again beneficial for the entire stakeholders, not just for the shareholders, but all other members of the corporate community. Letter D, decisions on major organization and management reorganization. Management reorganization meaning um, reorganization meaning it entails reshuffling of personnel, for example, changing of personnel, changing of managers, and the likes. Review of the effectiveness of internal control and the risk management systems. This function might be delegated to internal auditing if the company has an internal auditing function. Yes, although the company might be considered to have an internal audit function, but these internal auditors, take note, will also report to the board. All right? It is the board who will still make decisions as to the implementation of the possible suggestion or corrective actions that can be suggested by these internal auditors. So they are the ones who review whether the implemented internal control are still suitable for the current environment they have. Letter F, communication with shareholders. So they are responsible for the communication with shareholders. For example, in the communication of financial status of the entity, although it is the management who is responsible for making the financial statements, but it is the board of directors' responsibility to review and to authorize these financial statements to be issued to the shareholders, right? So technically, it is still the board of director who has the voice, no, who are the front lines in communicating whatever is the happenings, especially in finances of the entity through the shareholders. Letter G, remuneration of executive directors and other senior executive directors. So it is their responsibility, take note, to provide remuneration to executive directors. But no one, no director is allowed to decide for his or her own remuneration or per dime. All right. In making remuneration decisions, they should consider always the sake of the shareholders, whether that act of them is still in line or congruent with the maximization of the resources of the shareholders. If not, then they might not they should be observant, no, they should be keen enough, no, in creating remuneration services to them, to among themselves. Appointments to the board, they do also company policies and proposing dividends. Now, this is very common to our accounting parlance. There is only distribution of dividends towards our shareholders when the board of directors approved that particular issuance. May it be cash dividends, share dividends, although share dividends, guys, would also require the approval of the shareholders. But primarily, when it takes, when it entails cash dividend and property dividend, that only requires the approval of the board. Okay, when the board does not approve for the distribution of dividend, then therefore, um, no dividend will also be distributed to them. All right. This time, let us proceed with unitary and the two-tier board of directors. So the two types of board of directors, directorship. In most cases, companies have a single board of directors, like unitary board. This board would consist of executive and non-executive directors with a chair and a chief executive officer. But some countries have a two-tier board structure, like in Germany and in Netherlands, consisting of a management board of executive directors headed by a CEO or managing director. They are responsible for the day-to-day running of the business, and the management board reports to the supervisory board. A supervisory board is that of composed ng non-executive directors, so headed by the chair of the company. Now, the difference between executive directors and executive directors are those directors with functions in the entity, meaning they are technically employees of the corporation. While non-executive directors, these are directors who are really independent without any link, no, in the day-to-day operation of the entity. So this non-executive director is headed by the chair of the company, and this board has no executive function as what I have mentioned earlier. However, it may review the company's direction and strategy. It is meant to safeguard shareholders' interest, and they receive formal reports of the state of the company's affairs and finances. They are also Most of your they also approve the accounts and may appoint committees and undertake investigations. All right. Now, in these cases, guys, the board of directorship actually in the Philippines no requires the creation of the board of director in the Philippines requires to really have a non-executive director, no, an NED, to make sure that the decision of the board is not influenced by anyone, especially those who are related in the executive function of the entity. In a two-tier company board structure, membership of two board is entirely separate. The effectiveness of this type of structure will depend on the relationship between the chair and the CEO. In public companies, it is usual in a unitary board for most non-executive directors to be classified as independent, as what I have mentioned earlier, guys. In the Philippines, we actually practice unitary board of directors, no? So most, if not all, non-executive directors should really be independent. NEDs in a supervisory board would not be regarded as independent. In a two-tier board structure, NEDs on the supervisory groups are often represent interest groups like employees or major shareholders or former executive directors of the company, possibly former members of the management board who have now retired from the company. Okay? So major advantages and disadvantages of a two-tier board. So again, your two-tier board includes a board for the management and a board that is composed of non-executive directors. So advantages includes responsibilities for management and governance are clearly separated. Obviously, management are responsible for running the corporation itself, and the non-executive directors will be the one who are responsible to make in making sure that the governance practices are taken place or are in place. Supervisory board members recognizes interest of stakeholders group. All right. So the supervisory board or the ones that is composed of non-executive directors will really make sure to secure the interest of other stakeholders, including the shareholders. And your executive directors and NEDs have different responsibilities and duties. So there will really be no incompatible duties between two. So we could really um, assume that they could effectively work because their responsibilities are not interlocking. However, on the other hand, disadvantages of a two-tier board includes supervisory board can be very large. Decision making might be slower than with a unitary board because obviously you need to let um, the management board and this supervisory board to finish their respective board meetings before having into consideration a caucus or a caucus meaning the agreement of these two boards, no? Kailangan pa mag-agree ang two boards in order for them to create a decision. And it might be the risk of conflict between the two boards. Yes, that could be a source of clash between the two sets of board and the risk of conflict between interest groups on the supervisory board as well. On the other hand, pag unitary board naman, it also have its set of advantages and disadvantages. Yun nga guys, unitary board meaning the board is consisting of the executive directors and non-executive directors. It is the common practice here in the Philippines. So advantages of a unitary board can be small in size, right? Unitary boards can be small in size because there are no requirements to appoint directors who represent stakeholders' interest groups. It is easier for the non-executive directors and the executive director to work cooperatively. Yes, if the ideal setup is there, then they could work harmoniously as long as they don't influence each other, as long as they respect each other's opinion, and making sure that the executive function and the non-executive function are really doing their best to secure whoever are to secure everyone in the stakeholders. And unitary board work towards a common goal, which is what the board considers to be in the best interest of the shareholders and others. Pero si unitary board naman naa siyang mga respective disadvantages. So that disadvantages include unitary board can also get too large if not careful. If there is a conflict between the chair and the CEO, this can negatively affect the company. And as with any board, there not be a consensus of what the goals are. So posible na iba ang that's always common in a board, no? Especially when the board consists of very bright individuals or bright people, very competent people, no? With different expertise, field of expertise. So clash might really be present. But again, we should make sure that this clash is for the achievement of the um, overall objective, which is beneficial to the majority of the stakeholders. Okay. So this time, let's proceed with the board composition and types of directors, including defining executive and non-executive directors. So the combined code states that at least one half of the board members should be independent non-executive directors with a minimum of three non-executive directors. So there has to be a balance between executive directors and non-executive directors. But there should be at least three no, non-executive directors. The combined code also states that a former CEO of a company should not move on to become the company chairman. All right. So the combined code argues that the power of chairman and CEO should not be held by one individual because it gives too much power on the board to that individual. So in some cases, chairman and the CEO are just the same, but ideally, the code suggests that the chairman and CEO should not be held by one individual. No, but commonly it is practiced by closed corporations, no, where that corporation are simply owned by family members. So the chairman and the CEO na office can be held by a one person. Pero in a publicly listed corporation, the board, the governance structure, the corporate governance, no, suggest to separate it from one person. The board composition includes a chairman who may be any executive director but is usually a non-executive director. So sometimes there is a deputy chairman. Deputy chairman is um, the next chairman if ever the actual chairman is not around. All right, a chief executive officer who an executive director. So the board is also includes the CEO, who is an executive director, obviously, because that director is the chief executive officer. So therefore, he is the one responsible for running the company, no, the day-to-day operations of the company, and at the same time, he or she is a director. So therefore, he is considered as an executive director. Another executives or other executive directors, possibly including CFO, Chief Financial Officer, COO, Chief Operating Officers, or your CIO, Chief Information Officers, and all other executive directors. And other non-executive directors. So again guys, itong mga non-executive directors, these are directors na not employed in the entity, not responsible for any administrative function in the entity. So they are really independent. So in terms of balance of power, the board should contain a suitable balance of power in order to prevent one person or group of people from dominating the decision making of the board. So mawala na ang purpose na to if the board is dominated by one group. No? When there are several independent-minded individuals on the board, it is more likely that the interests of the shareholders and possibly also other stakeholders in the company will properly be represented. That is really true, no? Because if they cannot be easily be influenced because they are divided. But although they are divided, but their objective, guys, is for the benefit, no, for the interest of the shareholders. Unlike with, for example, there is domination, no, the board is dominated by one group, if that group is, being influenced, then the entire group, no, will also be influenced. So several ways to achieve suitable balance includes: letter A, the same individual should not hold the position of CEO and the chairman at the same time. So as mentioned earlier, for internal control purposes, and for not be able to provide too much power in one person. So the CEO and the chairman of the board office should be kept separate, and the roles of the CEO and chairman should be specified formally so that one individual is not able to take responsibilities away from the other. So of course, the board should make sure what are the responsibilities of the board, and the CEO should also know their respective limits as the head of admin function and as the head of supervisory function. And letter C, um, there needs to be a written charter. Obviously, that written charter includes your articles of corporation. All right. So there needs to be the presence of independent, non-executive directors on the board. So the combined code states that for large stock companies, a majority of the board should be independent. Okay. So again, dapat at least three minimum of three directors in a corporation should be independent. Pero kung pila man na sila kabuok, at least 50% should be independent. Okay? There should be a senior non-executive director also, no? With sufficient strength of character to challenge both the chairman and CEO. If this seems necessary, this person needs to be able to ask hard questions. So, of course, to extract the best out of the group, there should be that someone who will challenge, no, even if it's the CEO's idea or the chairman's idea. Just to make sure that there is balance, no, there is check and balance, even if that idea, that proposition is from the chairman or the CEO. So that is the responsibility of a senior non-executive director. No, dili pod sa tanang panahon na ang iyang ano na lang kay kontrabida, no? Dili sa tanang panahon ang iyang role kay kontrabida, iyang i-contradict na lang tanan. So maybe on some points which sometimes not beneficial to the stakeholders, that time, no, the senior executive director will senior non-executive director will step up. The NEDs must be effective in their roles. They need to be able to give sufficient time to the company. So since they don't participate in the operations of the entity, so they should meaning they don't really have day-to-day access in the corporation, but they should see to it that in every board meeting, whether it's special or regular meeting, they will have time for their for the corporation. And then letter G, some decision making should be delegated to the board committees to remove decision making from directors in cases where there is a conflict of interest, or to act as a check on some of the activities of executive directors. For example, the audit committee. So take note, guys, that um, there are also, aside from the board of directors, there are also different committees. All right. I'd like you to comment down below, guys, the different committee, no, that will help the board of directors to create decision. Okay, so it's your assignment to write down in the comment section. Let us see who among you guys are, who among you can go up to this level of the video lecture, no. Comment down below what are the different um committee that will help the board of directors in making decisions. All right? Sige. Now, this time let us proceed with executive and non-executive directors. So, I already have mentioned naman this one, si executive and non-executive directors. Executive directors are directors who also have executive management responsibilities in the company. They are normally full-time employees of the entity. While on the other hand, NEDs or non-executive directors are directors who do not have any executive management responsibilities. Number one, they are not employees of the company and they are not full time. No, they are not full time because they are just on call. They will just proceed in the premises of the corporation where the location of the corporation when there are called for meetings, whether special or regular meetings. When they are appointed, there should be a clear understanding about how much each month or each year the non-executive director probably be required to give the company's affairs. Now, why is it that there is a need for a non-executive director? What is their purpose? What is their role and their responsibility? Number one, for strategy. They should contribute development of the company's business strategy. Development of the strategy on an independent point of view. Okay? Because if the one who will create the strategy is the one who will implement that and put that into action, then possibly there can be no one who could give fresh idea or new idea that could be incorporated with that specific idea or strategy. All right? Maybe there are but loopholes in that strategy, but since they are the ones who create that strategy and they will the ones who will implement it, they could not consider that. Diba? You cannot correct your own mistake. Usually, no, you cannot consider, you cannot check your own mistake, no, unless there is a third eye or a third party that will let us realize that that is a mistake. And letter B, scrutinizing performance. The NED needs to scrutinize the performance of the management, obviously, to give pressure for the management to do good, to perform good for the benefit of the general interest of the shareholders and other stakeholders. So that is the responsibility of the NED or the non-executive director. Also, in risk management or internal control, NED should satisfy themselves that financial information produced by management is reliable. They need to satisfy themselves those financial controls and systems of risk management are robust, all right, and defensible. As well as in terms of people, they should be involved in the people side of running the company. So, non-executive director are really the ones who will stand for the shoes of the different minority and all other shareholders of the entity. NEDs are responsible for deciding the level of remuneration of executive directors. So since the shareholders cannot decide for that matter, for example, the salary or the remuneration of the executive director, so again, it is the job of the non-executive director to make sure that what is compensated to the executive directors are just and equitable, no? Walay bahid ng ano take advantage. Wala dapat dili ma-take advantage ang power of the executive director. Because if no one will look at that, then possibly, I'm not saying that there is taking of advantage with power, there is conflict of interest, but there could be a possibility for that to happen. And then they also have a prime role in appointing and removing senior management in succession planning. Succession planning, guys, is very important because it allows the board to maintain the competence and, you know, the competence of the culture of the board, no, even if the senior directors are already retiring, no. So always na combination of seasoned and new breeds of directors ang combinations ato ang board of directors. Okay. So this time, proceed naman tayo guys sa role ng CEO and the board chairman. No, let us distinguish CEO and the board chairman. By the way, guys, I will give you the responsibility to read and understand the general principles of legal and regulatory framework within which directors operate on corporate boards, both duties while in office and duties leaving office. All right, I'll give you that responsibility to read and comprehend. But this time, let's proceed with the comparison of the roles of the CEO and the board chairman. Sorry for the spelling for the chairman, but the role of the chairman, again, the chairman of the board must act as a spokesperson of the board. No, they sorry. Before the chairman, proceed muna tayo pala kay CEO. Before kay chairman, kay CEO sata. So the CEO is responsible for the executive management of the company operations. So day-to-day operation, administrative function, no? Operation, preparation of financial statement, everything. Admin function is the responsibility of the CEO. The CEO is the leader of the management team, no? And all senior managers report to the CEO. So all departments will report to the CEO. Like for example, senior management in different departments, in HR, in accounting, in finance, in general, in admin, in operations, and the likes will all report to the CEO. And then, if there is an executive management committee for the company, the CEO should be the chairman of this committee. All right? If there's a two-tier level of board, then the management committee, executive management committee, or MANCOM, no? Ex- MANCOM, executive MANCOM will be headed by the chief executive officer. The CEO reports to the board, obviously, on the activities of the entire management team and is answerable to the board for the company's operational performance. It is the board who creates strategies, but it is the CEO together with the management team who will realize it, no, and will convert that major objective into a more specific objective per department. And then letter E, risk management. The CEO is responsible to manage the company's risk profile and liaison with stakeholders. The CEO need to deal with those interested in the company. All right. Let us compare this time the role of the CEO and that of the chairman. So the chairman naman is the spokesperson of the board, obviously. He or she is the conduit of communication between the CEO and the shareholders. So ensuring that the board as a whole and also individual directors contribute effectively to the work of the board. They set agenda for the board meeting. It is the responsibility of the chairman who makes the agenda for every board meeting, although with the assistance of the corporate secretary, but it is really the role of the chairman to prepare the, no, agenda, to set every agendum in the board meeting, and then to provide suitable information before each board meeting who will call for meeting, although again with assistance of the corporate secretary. At board meetings, the board chairman encourages open dialogue between members of the board. No, open dialogue, a healthy conversation, healthy debate on some topics, on issues, no, in order for the group, to that specific august body, to extract the best in them for the interest of the shareholders, and helps non-executive directors to contribute effectively to the company. Okay? So the chairman is also responsible for the effectiveness of the board. He is therefore responsible for number one, the induction of all new directors and the annual performance review of the board committee, and the individual directors. So again, chief si ano ninyo si board chairman is the chief of all. Siya ang chief pilot, no? Siya ang chief accountant for a particular, no, not chief, in accounting setting. So siya ang chief accountant. Kung group of accountant, siya ang chief accountant. So sa pilot, siya ang chief pilot. Sa o uban pa ng mga chief deraa, no? Dili ng chief nga naa sa kuan, chief nga naa sa gate. Lahi man to nga chief nga naa sa gate. Joke lang. Alright. So since siya ang chief ng lahat, so the board chairman should set as an example to everyone, both to the non-executive directors and to the management or executive directors. He or she should be advocate of ethical behavior in the company, And an effective chairman should establish a close working relationship with the CEO and should ensure that all decisions by the board are implemented. Okay, not too close to the fact that pwede ma-influence ni CEO si chairman, no? Letter H, he or she should promote best practice in corporate governance and high standards of ethical conduct by the company and its employees. All right. He or she should also provide leadership for the company that represents its views with external stakeholders, including the shareholders. So those are the difference between the job of a CEO and a board chairman. So actually, guys, your module has presented to you the summary of the roles of the CEO and chairman. So you just consider na lang what's really the outline of the difference of the responsibilities and roles of CEO and your chairman. Basta, both of these people are the key agent in the achievement of the organization's goal and objectives. That is for the benefit and interest of the entire stakeholders. No? So I think that would be the end of our lecture for this pertaining to the board of directors and the corporate responsibility or governance responsibilities of the board of directors. If you have any thoughts that you would like to share, you may comment it down below. Assignment again. Your assignment, don't forget to comment down your, all committees that what are the different committees that would help the board in making decisions. All right. So again, thank you very much for your time in watching this video lecture and somehow, ano, um, understanding the topics for this unit learning objective. So if you have any more questions and queries, you may um, address that during our video or virtual class. All right. So thank you very much for your time and God bless everyone.